Good morning, or good afternoon, or evening, or night, whenever you decide to use your eyeballs to gaze upon this content. Tell Me Why follows more in the direction of Life is Strange in terms of its format and storytelling. It's episodic, with 3 chapters. Overall, it will not take you long to complete them. It depends on how you play. It could take you anywhere from 6 to 9 hours. That is, if you walk around and click on everything and listen and absorb everything, and there's quite a bit to click on. There won't be any major spoilers in this video unless you want to go in blind to the game, which I recommend for a lot of titles as it will monumentally raise your level of enjoyment. So, no spoilers, but if you want to go in blind, go and play it, come back to this video and listen to me ramble, or review it. Mostly ramble. Tell Me Why is kind of like if Life is Strange got a little less strange. It has complex dialogue and dense plotting to Life is Strange that is similar, layered conversations and complicated relationships, and detailed history. It's got the same attention to detail of Don't Nod's previous titles without the explosive or earth-shattering events of those previous games. Also, the focus is again on 2 characters, but this time you're playing as both at different intervals. Each episode gives you a chance to influence each character as you navigate the story. Like Life is Strange 2, Tell Me Why takes a swing at addressing some social issues, mainly with LGBTQ+ issues. But the difference is that Tell Me Why takes a more sophisticated approach to its messaging, where Life is Strange 2 seemingly wouldn't let you wander around a corner without beating you over the head with the brick that is the very not subtle political message that they are trying to send. As I said in my Life is Strange 2 review, it's not about agreement or disagreement. It's about disseminating the material in an organic way to serve the characters in the story, not forcing it in just to pat ourselves on the back and say, "We did it, folks. Ignorance has been defeated. Tolerance achieved." No. Tell Me Why features prominently LGBTQ+ characters, one of them being one of our protagonists in Tyler, a young trans man. We get a glimpse of the struggles he went through to be comfortable with who he is, but he's a confident young man otherwise who is well adjusted. Tyler being transgendered is part of the narrative, but it also isn't. The Don't Nod walked the line rather well in writing of this title, so it all goes down a bit easier without sacrificing its message. It also helps that they consulted a trans activists and transgendered people in order to write this character more accurately and truer to life and to the trans experience. Tell Me Why is not perfect, far from it in fact, but what it does with its discussion and application of issues surrounding the LGBTQ+ community is commendable and much more natural than anything from Life is Strange 2. And it's episodic. It plays similarly to the original Life is Strange and its sequel, or any of the Telltale series of games, or look at any of the stuff from Quantic Dream. That's essentially the crux of Tell Me Why, working through dialogue, clicking on things, and solving some light puzzles. And there's plenty of puzzles. Some of them are easy and some of them are quite intricate. Some of them towards the end get pretty complex, and others really depend on your attention to detail. You always have options to get around the puzzle if you hate to read or want to keep the game moving, but I always felt it was more rewarding to actually solve the puzzle. I am simplifying it because Tell Me Why's narrative is anything but simple. That's mainly what you're doing throughout the course of the game. If you want more of an expansive gameplay experience, maybe go check out Don't Nod's Vampire. It's similar in visual quality and dialogue style and does feature combat that is fun, though it is slightly janky, I guess would be the best way to describe it. This isn't that though. This is a cold hard talkie. Not turkey, talkie. It's talkie. Some would say even a walkie-talkie. Hold your applause to the end, please. Thank you. I won't spoil the plot here, but what I will say is that Tell Me Why is the epitome of a slow burn, as in it takes a long time to get going, and even when it does get going, it doesn't exactly get going. It's a very slow-moving story. It doesn't lack the dramatic revelations of its characters or even its story, but none of it is jaw-dropping or even edge-of-your-seat thrill. I'm worried that sounds like I'm being negative or that it's supposed to be a knock against it, but I don't mean it that way. At only 3 chapters, it actually works fairly well. It might be slow, but it's also not dragging out conflict or development of its story and the characters for the sake of holding you over until the next chapter or episode, or even spending too much time on characters that don't factor much into the plot. If you're used to faster paced narratives with more fiery, dramatic exchanges, that's just not what Tell Me Why is. It's not explosive or even earth-shattering for its characters. Again, it doesn't make it bad or not worth your time, more that you need to be patient as it weaves its narrative over its 3 chapters. It is, in a way, without filler. It's not a long 3 chapters. If it feels long, it's because there's not too much urgent danger engulfing the proceedings here, save for 1 or 2 sections, and even then those are resolved quickly enough that there's no lasting implications from it. There is a supernatural element to the game for story purposes and an interesting way of seeing our 2 protagonists work through problems together.
Ouch! Are you okay? What happened?
I just hit my head like an idiot. Wait. What? Where are you?
Ty, I'm outside. But I can hear you in my head. Our voice. It's back.
Holy shit. I don't suppose you remember how to get to the hatch. Dragons, straight ahead.
Life is Strange 2 and its predecessor also played with supernatural elements, but they made it much more central to the plot. You could say it does here too, but it's rather tame. It works fine, and it does play a vital role in the story. These types of games to me are like what I would call sophisticated point-and-click adventures. Complex plot and characters, but not much in the way of mechanics beyond dialogue choices or clicking on points of interest. And like I said, you'll click on things, lots of things. There's a lot of backstory and history, but it's also a convenient way that everything has a purpose and story and reason for being the way it is. These type of games use this as a tool for some exposition, and it's pretty effective. You want to know what Tyler and Allison are thinking and feeling about the things and people around them, and you can. Though it does get a little tiresome at times when it feels like Tyler and Allison seemingly have something to say about everything around them, and maybe it's just me being nitpicky, but sometimes an object is just an object. The story itself, again, mostly works for me, and at times it's a generally moving tale about trauma and the effects it can have on your psyche. But there's parts, including one in Chapter 3, where it can be a bit predictable. I essentially called what was going to happen towards the end of Chapter 2, and I ended up being right. One thing I thought was kind of weak in this game and almost always kind of made the game feel dated is the way that it handles its conversation. Not the writing, but its execution mechanically. You can tell looking at it that this isn't a spoiler, but this is not the best looking game out there, far from it, and that's not what makes it feel outdated. Well, it is a tiny bit of that, but it's also how the game handles the dialogue. Oftentimes, Tyler or Allison are locked stiffly in position with other characters as they enact stiff animations and converse. That's not really a deal breaker for me in terms of being able to enjoy it, but does make the game right away feel older than it is. Even Life is Strange 2, a game I did not enjoy as much as Tell Me Why, I felt had much more cinematic conversation. Sure, it had those moments too, but Tell Me Why uses the style almost to a fault. I get that that's the style maybe, but again, it makes the game feel, at least to my dumb eyes, appear dated. Frankly, I don't like to make a big deal about visuals because I know that's partially not important and partially subjective, character and writing wise. I think the dialogue is very well executed. Don't misunderstand. I'm pointing out more how it works mechanically. It's not the end of the world, but it definitely did take me out of the experience at times. But I have to say one last thing about the dialogue is that it actually, for the most part, about 80 to 90% of the time is very well done. You don't feel like you're putting inputs in for these characters at times. It feels more like you're them and working through these tough decisions and conversations and weaving through the complexities of each character's personalities. So by the time you do reach a decision or end a conversation, you feel like you actually worked for that outcome. It's the way that Don't Nod handles dialogue and conversation throughout their games, and it's hard to explain, but it feels more like you're working through issues as opposed to making choices. Now there's plenty of choices, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like a choice because it blends so well into the dialogue's often nuanced framing. The voice acting is generally pretty good, and your two leads, Tyler and Allison, are really well nuanced and played well. They at times, though, their siblings tend to be good foils for each other. Tyler wants to confront the trauma of their past, and Allison, having lived with it for so long, wanting to forget it and leave it behind. And again, I don't want to hound this game for visuals because it's definitely not the most important thing, but when the voices are much more expressive than the faces and sometimes they don't even look lip synced properly, you notice.
Wait, first thing in the morning.
Shut up. I used to go there all the time.
For real?
Yeah.
Hey, well, if you want to go sometime, holler at me. I don't mind sharing.
Cool. Most guys I know get all Smeagol about their fishing spots.
Oh, look at you two, bonding over the most slow and boring way to kill an animal.
She's just jealous because she couldn't catch a fish, even if she filled the lake with cyanide
I'm
first.
not... Ugh, never mind. Tyler, we better get started with our shopping.
Yeah, I'll be around if you need
Again,
anything.
this doesn't ruin the experience, but it is something that for me is just hard to ignore. The other voices range from pretty good to kind of okay. Nobody's bad, but nobody is stand-up beyond the two leads, which is kind of consistent with each of Don't Nod's games prior. I describe it as I feel in a lot of other movies and shows and games as a kind of sleepy voice cast syndrome, where it feels like the cast is doing its best, but me as the audience, I want more from them. None of them are bad, but they do leave a bit to be desired. And we all want to be desired. DM me. Don't actually. There is something about the game's soundtrack that does it for me as well. It has its somber tunes and more dramatic moments, but there's also a kind of whimsical nature to it at times that highlights what this story ultimately ends up being about. Memory. It doesn't chart new territory for contemporary music scores, but I'm also dumb and probably wouldn't be able to tell if it was, so overall music does its job to blend you into this world, and it might be cliche to say, but it gives the game its personality and almost feels like a character in and of itself.
Pelican.
She was the most generous one.
Yeah, but there was always a catch.
Okay, so Tell Me Why is a good game. It's not going to blow your mind or be as explosive as other titles might be in the same genre, if there are any, but what you have here is a decently acted, generally well written, if not little slow game that is hard to tell you isn't at least worth a chance. It's on Game Pass, so if you have that, there's virtually no risk involved. I won't say it's great or as well plotted as the original Life is Strange, but it does what it set out to do, and I didn't dislike it, and I did enjoy it quite a bit, to give it a nod, to tell you to give it a shot. That being said, if you're not a fan of Donut's other episodic titles, then you might not like it. And like I said, there are choices so you can get different outcomes than to the one I got, and at some point I might even do another playthrough to see the other outcomes. But chapter to chapter, based on what I saw, it won't change your experience drastically. But it could alter the end state for all the characters, and that will be interesting to see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't be shy about hitting the like button or the dislike button, even if you didn't like it. Subscribing is cool too, but only cool kids subscribe, so if you're not one of them, you probably won't. Also, remember that I love you. Maybe. It's complicated, okay?